This is Keith Thompson of Reformed Apologetics Ministries. Paul wrote his epistle to the Romans around AD 55 to 60, give or take. However, Rome teaches that Peter was reigning as Bishop of Rome during this period from about AD 42 to 67, give or take. What's interesting is that although Paul, in Romans, has many exhortations about Christians in Rome submitting to God, Romans 6:13, submitting to the Scriptures and doctrine, Romans 9:17 and 19, submitting to God's righteousness, Romans 10:3, submitting to the government, Romans 13:1-3, and submitting to truth, Romans 2:8, Paul doesn't have one single word to say to the Roman Christians about submitting to Peter's supposed unique papal authority. Peter, who was allegedly reigning as Bishop of Rome with absolute primacy of jurisdiction at that time, nor does Paul have even one word to say about making sure to submit to Peter's supposed future papal successors, the bishops of Rome, in a unique way. Why would Paul not exhort the Christians in Rome to submit to the Pope if papal primacy was a first-century reality, and if Paul was exhorting them to submit to numerous other authorities? This is indeed very odd if Paul and the early church believed and taught the necessity of the doctrine of the papacy, which would be very important and crucial in a day when heresies and divisions were quickly emerging. There is no indication in the lengthy letter to the Romans that the papacy existed. Moreover, when the Apostle Paul outlined the church's ministries and offices, the papal office is nowhere to be found, even though it was a supposed obvious and major truth affirmed in the first century, according to Roman Catholicism. Why, it's as if Paul knew nothing of the doctrine of the papacy. In 1 Corinthians 12:28, Paul states, quote, "And God has appointed in the church first apostles, second prophets, third teachers, then miracles, then gifts of healing, helping, administering, and various kinds of tongues," unquote. Had Paul believed what the modern Roman religion now teaches and stresses as a vital and binding doctrine regarding Peter's alleged papal office, Paul would certainly stress at least once that God appointed in the church the Bishop of Rome and his successors as unique vicars of Christ in guiding the church. If Romanism is true, we should expect to find evidence of it in such passages where the church offices are outlined, but we don't. Here the apostles are portrayed as equals in office. It's interesting that in 1 Timothy 3, Paul discusses offices such as bishop and deacon, but nowhere does Paul talk about the office of the supposed supreme bishop in Rome, which was to be succeeded.